Now that Chris Hadfield's back on Earth and beginning his recovery, it's a good time to ask, when will the next Canadian be heading to outer space? Our next guest says he's undaunted by doubts about Canada's future out there. He says the private sector will provide plenty of opportunities. So joining us from Houston, Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen. Hey, how are you doing, Jeremy?
I'm wonderful. How are you today?
Great, great, thanks. We were just talking about Chris Hadfield's news conference. What stood out to you from what he had to say?
Chris Hadfield's always a very interesting person for me to listen to, often because I gain so much perspective on what my future may hold. And Chris talked a lot today about his mission and what it meant to him, what it brought back to Canadians. But he also spoke about our legacy with respect to the Canadian Space Agency. We really believe that we've done amazing things for Canada. We've driven excellence in the past with our Earth observation satellites, the communication satellites, Canadarm2 legacy, and we really feel like this mission has brought a lot of not just great science, but now an awareness of the space program and a beautiful perspective of where we are in the universe on spaceship Earth.
Yeah, when it comes to the awareness of space, what do you think were the greatest achievements with this mission?
Well, I think specifically the fact that so many Canadians are paying attention. So many more Canadians know we have an international space station. They know we have a Canadian Space Agency, and so many of the Canadian youth now know that, hey, as a Canadian, I have an opportunity to, A, travel in space, B, be part of a team that exploits technology and makes a benefits for humanity, or to just partake in these incredible missions. I think that's what Chris has given to Canada.
Mm-hmm. But then we don't have any other Canadians scheduled to go out there. Why do you think that is?
Oh, well, this is pretty typical. Our Canadian space program is quite modest, of course. We're a small country. We don't have an enormous budget to fly people in space all the time. So when I was recruited, basically 4 years ago, it was made very clear to me, you won't be flying in space immediately. You're going to have to wait. So this is not unusual. But you mentioned it yourself. The commercial industry is getting involved in space transportation. This marks a pretty enormous turning point from my perspective. I'm pretty optimistic that we're going to have opportunities in this decade for both David and I, but more importantly, that we're going to be able to fly more Canadians in space in the future. I'm pretty excited.
More Canadians or more Canadian astronauts?
Well, more Canadians and more Canadian astronauts. So
yeah.
I think we're going to see a change. I think we'll still have government astronauts. I think in my career time frame, we're going to have commercial astronauts. I think some of them undoubtedly will be Canadian. And I think we'll have more space tourists as well. We've already had Guy Lelevertier fly in space as a Canadian. So things are changing. It's kind of exciting. Not just kind of. It's really exciting.
Well, how long are you prepared to wait?
Well, when I was going through the recruitment process, I had the opportunity to speak with Chris. In fact, he spoke to all of us. He spent a few hours with us kind of describing the job for us. And he said, look, guys, you need to understand, you are accepting this job as an astronaut for everything other than flying in space. The flying in space, you will spend less than 0.5% of your career time in space, and you have to love the rest of the job. And the flying in space aspect is the icing on the cake, if you will. And so I have to say he's right. This is an amazing job that I have. I get to travel to interesting places. I meet a lot of interesting people. I'm learning all the time. I'm operationally challenged. I still fly. I love this job. It's a really tremendous job.
Yeah, and with more Canadians getting interested in space, I'm thinking about those kids who are part of space clubs and things like that. You hope that the Canadian astronaut program will maintain itself, right?
Oh, absolutely. I think people are concerned about that. I don't have any concern. I think we've shown historically the benefit of the space program. I think this mission has really highlighted the benefits that it can bring back to humanity. And so I don't have any concern that we won't continue to take incremental steps forward. And Chris highlighted in his conference this morning that we are always on the cusp of not being in space on any given day. Right now, the International Space Station is a fragile orbiting laboratory. We're always struggling to keep it alive up there. We had, a fairly serious issue with an ammonia leak at the end of Chris's mission that we had to go and do a spacewalk in a day and a half. And it should highlight to people how hard it is to do this. Chris mentioned this morning that on any, for one of his shuttle launches, now when we look back historically, he had a 1 in 32 chance of it ending in a disaster. And so that's space. I mean, we are pushing the boundaries here. And so we can't have an expectation that it's going to be easy and always available. We just have to continue to take incremental steps like we've always done.
All right, great to speak with you. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, have a great day.
That's Jeremy Hansen joining us live from Houston.